Okay, good. Did you have lunch?
Yes.
At the Gregorian University, the professors do not like this lecture time because after lunch in Italy, they have big lunch and the students come back to the class, and the students after the lunch are like this. But you not, You are awake? Okay, so to make sure that you are awake, I'm going to show you pictures. And as I promised you yesterday, who was here yesterday? Who was not here yesterday? Hello, my name is Sean. Okay. Yesterday I promised you, when you asked me how, we spoke who, what, when, where, why. Yesterday afternoon, I wanted to show you how the Vatican communicates. And then I could not get my beautiful MacBook to work. And so now, thanks to your technical help, we have the pictures that I need. And so, yes, I would like to show you some pictures. And this is a lecture that I would give at the Gregorian University. So for an hour you can pretend you are in Rome and you are at the Pontifical Gregorian University and you are following my lecture. And the lecture is on communications and communication styles and communicators, and it's mostly on how the Vatican communications works. And it begins with this picture, which is the black hole, because it begins in the beginning. And in the beginning, if you know your Bible, how does the Bible begin? In the beginning there was? In the beginning there was? Nothing. In the beginning there was nothing. And isn't it a mystery? It's a mystery to me. Huh? So why was God not happy with nothing? Why couldn't he just stay in his nothing?
He wanted dialogue.
He wanted, it's beautiful. Say it loud.
He wanted dialogue.
That's beautiful. He's a communicator. That's why. God is he is the great communicator. But if you are a communicator, you need someone to communicate with. And I believe that's why creation happens. And the first form of communication was what we call oral communication. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in a world far, far away, we used to speak to one another. We did, you know. We would sit down and we'd say, "Hello, darling. So how was your day?" And you'd say, "Well, it's this. And you, darling, how was your day?" And when we had a problem, we would sit down and we would discuss the problem. We didn't send SMSs. We didn't send WhatsApp messages. We talked to each other. And we told stories to each other. We call that the oral tradition. And most of what we know, isn't it wonderful, Western culture that comes from the biblical tradition and the classical tradition, is stories. Stories. What was the first story you were told? Do you remember? Do you remember the first story you were told? Lula Baby. Okay, tell us the story of Lula Baby, please.
Maybe I don't translate it right.
The lullaby.
Lullaby.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you remember?
Songs.
Just songs? Do you remember who told you? Who told you the story? Yes. We have the storytelling traditions in all the cultures, the different cultures, but most of the time, who is the person telling you the story? And which parent?
Grandma.
Grandfather or grandmother? Okay, grandfather? Grandmother? Yeah, yes. Grandmothers. Grandmothers are the ones, grandmothers are the ones who tell us that. We often say, I don't know whether you say in Ukrainian, you do in English, we say that stories are handed down from father to son. You say that?
Yes.
It's a lie. It's a lie. The fathers were out hunting, the fathers were out fishing, the ones handing the stories down, stories are handed down from mother to daughter. Women are the ones who tell the stories. The stories we know, our cultures, our traditions, yes, most of the time, yes, there are exceptions. I like to think I'm an exception. I told stories to my children. But most of the time, it's the women who tell the stories, and we know what we know thanks to them. We already said this morning that we've gone beyond the oral tradition, and we are living now in what we call the visual tradition. And this is where we started. At some point, it wasn't enough to tell the story. We had to show the story. And we began painting on caves, and that wasn't enough. And so we began painting on temples, and we began using symbols. And they became more and more complicated, the symbols that we used. As our cultures became more and more complicated, and we used whatever we had, men and women and buildings, whatever we had at our disposal to illustrate our cultures and our ideas. What's that? It's, statistically, it is the most recognizable piece of art in the world. And if ever, where is it kept? Do you remember? In the Louvre in Paris. If ever you go, anybody been to the Louvre in Paris? Yeah. Did you see the Mona Lisa? How close did you get to it? Not so close, I know. It's a very tiny painting, but to get close to it is impossible because everybody must get the selfie. And isn't it interesting now? It's no longer the picture, it's me in the picture. What do you think about that? Huh? Do you think it's strange? It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. I go to museums, I want to see the picture. And while I'm trying, excuse me, this is the picture, okay? I'm trying to see, yes, look at the lights and the shadows, and there's somebody going, and I'm saying, excuse me, and they're going, and I say, I get to go away. Let me see the picture. Anyway, yes. What do you know about the Mona Lisa? Why is she famous? Why is she famous? Because of the smile. Yes. Do you know what art critics say now about the smile? Nearly all Renaissance paintings. Have you ever seen a Renaissance painting with somebody smiling like this? No. Why not? They all smile.
They have bad teeth.
Yes. They had very bad teeth. A wealthy woman like her would drink chocolate and eat lots of sugar, which makes your teeth go black and fall out. So her real smile would probably be something like this. So it's just as well that she's not smiling. Anyway. The visual tradition. After the visual tradition, we move on and we move into the church. And the church picks up on the visual tradition and uses symbolism in its stained glass windows and its paintings. I was admiring the church that is being built next to the Collegium down the road. And I was looking at the shapes this morning while I was having breakfast, looking out of the window and looking at the different shapes in the church. And I wonder, do you know what everything means something? The church understands the value of symbolism very well. And in our very quick digital age, sometimes we forget the value of symbolism. Why are most church windows round? What shape is God? God is a circle. God is a circle. Why is God a circle? It's infinite, exactly. Your wedding ring, what shape will it be?
I don't know.
I hope it'll be. I hope your wedding ring will be a circle because you want your love to last forever. It must have no beginning and no end. A circle is perfect. God is perfect. And that's why we have circular windows, usually over the door. Because many churches, when you come to Rome and I take you to St. Peter's, you will see St. Peter's is built like the classical temples facing the east, the rising sun. And so the sun is God. The light, God comes into the church through the window. How many symbols can you see in this picture? How many can you recognize? If you had to read this picture to someone, how would you read the symbols? What symbols can you see?
Part of the wall. The Holy Spirit.
You can see the Holy Spirit up there, the dove, yes. You can see the menorah, which is the Jewish candle. How many branches does the menorah have? 7. 6 days plus 1, it's the creation. The menorah represents the burning bush of Moses. God creates the world in 6 days. God is at the center. He is number 7. There's the burning bush. There's the manger. What does this represent? Yes. You will see it all over St. Peter's Basilica. It represents pilgrimage. It's the pilgrim. We are on an earthly pilgrimage towards heaven. It's the shell that you pick up at the sea and that carries us to our eternal home. What's in the center? The Trinity which is at the center of our belief. Why is the Trinity a Trinity? Have you ever thought, why not 4 people? Or why is 3 perfect? 3 is the number of heaven. Why is 3 perfect? But why? Why is 3 perfect? Very good, very good. Man, woman, and child. What else? Associations. Go. Brainstorming. What comes in 3s? Go. 3. 3. Brainstorm. Yes. Shout.
Earth, and underground.
Very good. Heaven, earth, and the underground. Yes. Heaven, hell, and purgatory. Yes. Very good. Keep going. Brainstorming. 3s. What else? Shout. Don't just shout.
Start, middle, and finish.
Very good. It's a story, isn't it? Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yes. Our own lives. Birth, death, and resurrection. Mind, body, and spirit. Word, thought, and deed. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The 3 phases of the moon. So the whole concept of time as well. How many stories have 3? When you make a wish, how many wishes do you make? 3 wishes. In Ukrainian folklore, do you have the stories of the 3 little pigs? Do you have the Thor story of the 3 bears? Do you... 3. Always 3. How many crosses were on Calvary? On the Mount of Calvary, when Jesus died. How many crosses? How long did Jesus stay on the cross? 3 hours. What time, according to tradition, did Jesus die? 3 o'clock. How old was Jesus when he died? 33. How many years did Jesus run his ministry? 3 years. How many days was Jesus in the tomb? 3 days. How many? And so on, and so on, and so on. Numbers, we forget in our digital age, we forget how important numbers were to our ancestors. When you go back to the Collegium this evening, if you live there, look at the new church that is being built and count the windows and look at the center and count how many sides the center of the church building has. Count. Everything in communication has meaning. There is no coincidence, there is no chance. If communication is effective, then everything is connected. Count the number of sides. How many? It is an octagon. Do you think it's a chance? Coincidence? What does the octagon represent? Your communications, you need to know things. You need to see beyond what other people see. Being a communicator, an effective communicator, means being able to explain to other people why. To explain to other people why. Why did they choose this shape? Because the figure 8 represents Jesus. In ancient tradition, the figure 8 represents Jesus. Why? Because the figure 8 is 2 circles. And Jesus is true and true man. Exactly. And what happens if you take the figure 8 and you turn it on its side? What do you get? You get infinity. And according to the tradition, Jesus rose again on the 8th day, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Write down your favorite number from 1 to 10. Write it down quickly, your favorite number. After the class, tell me your favorite number and I will tell you what it means. If you want to, if you dare, I will tell you what it means.
Only up to 10?
Up to 13. Okay. Symbols, there you are. How many of these do you recognize? How many symbols can you recognize? Most of them are religious symbols. Is this a good symbol or a bad symbol?
The first, second one?
This is a good symbol or a bad symbol?
Bad.
First means
It's a good symbol. It's a Hindu symbol for... Exactly. And therefore, infinity. Because if you put a pin through there, and then you make it spin, it looks like a circle. But somebody called A.H., he lived in Germany, and he started a political party that begins with N.
And also 5 letters.
Yeah, he took the symbol and turned it around. He turned it around. You look at the Nazi swastika, is the same symbol turned around, because he thought that the Nazi party would last forever. Wrong. Some symbols, like the snake in our tradition. Who likes snakes? Snake, a good symbol or bad symbol? Bad symbol. Well, what about that snake then? Yes. In classical times, the snake was a positive symbol. When you come to Italy and we go to Pompeii, I will take you and show you the paintings in Pompeii where there are many snakes, because the snake is a symbol of fertility. The snake is a good luck symbol. And in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus, you have Moses who holds the snake up on a pole to cure the people. God tells him, put the snake on the pole and show it to the people and they will be cured of their illness, which is why we use the snake on the pole as a symbol for medicine. But in Christianity, we associate the snake with the devil. What's the apple? What does the apple represent in our symbolism? A very powerful symbol, isn't it?
Right.
It's the most recognizable symbol in the market today, Apple.
No.
And if you look at your apple, what do you notice about your apple? It has a bite. The symbol is a symbol of sin. Steve Jobs wanted you to sin by buying his apple. It's not just sin, it's wisdom, isn't it? It was the tree of good and evil, the tree of knowledge. In fact, where in the Bible does it say that it was an apple tree? It doesn't. It doesn't. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that Eve gave Adam an apple. Nowhere. It says she gave him the forbidden fruit. So where do we get the apple from?
From the pictures.
Why did we start depicting knowledge as an apple? Where did it come from? But why did they paint it? Do you want to know?
Yes.
Do you care?
Yes.
Are you curious?
Yes.
Then I will tell you. It was a mistake. Yes. It was a communications error. Because a long, long time ago, a monk in a monastery, copying out the Bible, he must have been a little bit tired, or maybe he had an extra glass of wine to drink, and the candle was burning down, and so he was supposed to write the word evil, malus, in Latin, for evil, good and evil. But he was a bit tired, and so he wrote malum. Malum in Latin means apple. So instead of writing evil, he wrote apple. And in those times, they would pass the manuscript on to the next monk, who would copy, and they copied and copied and copied. And so malus became malum, and evil became apple. That's the origin of the apple. You still with me? Yes? Do you care? Yes? Symbolism? Okay, we'll move ahead very fast. We move from the visual age into our written age. And here we understand. There you are. I did this just for you. That's you up there. Huh? Yes. Okay. Special homage. We move into the written age. And who is the man who led us into the written age? There he is. His name is Mr. Gutenberg. And he created the printing press, and the first book he printed was, the very first book was the Bible. So here you have the church entering into the world of technology. And this is where we are now. The church is interested in technology, has always been interested in technology, and how to use technology to communicate its message. And it's used everything from books, parchments, music. This is the Sistine Chapel Choir in Rome, named after the... Question for 100 points. Why is the Sistine Chapel Choir called the Sistine Chapel Choir?
16 Madonna.
Because it started singing in the Sistine Chapel. That's why it's called the Sistine Chapel Choir. What's that? What's that? That's the dome of St. Peter's. That's what it looks like looking up from underneath the dome of St. Peter's. What do you think it represents? It's the sky. It's the sky. Where did God live for our ancestors? For our ancestors, he was up in the sky. And so Michelangelo designs the dome like this because he wants you to look up so that you search for God up in the sky. And there is a circle again. You see the circles within circles. And God, there's a picture of God in mosaic way at the top. And you're supposed to look up to search for God and to look up. And that's exactly what our ancestors did. What's this? Who doesn't know what the statue is? Oh, okay. That's interesting. You knew what the Mona Lisa was, but you don't know what this is. This is supposed to be the most recognizable statue in the world. If the Mona Lisa is the most famous painting, this is supposed to be the most famous statue. This was created by Michelangelo when he was your age. He was between 22 and 23 years of age. No pressure, huh? No pressure. I don't expect you to do anything like this within the next couple of years. He created the Pietà. And this is the first thing you see when you come into St. Peter's. And I want you to see it now, because when I take you to see the real thing, it's going to be very, very exciting. And it's life-size. Everything is life-size about it. What does it depict? It's Mary holding the dead Jesus, right? And it's a statue of opposites. Mary is vertical, Jesus is horizontal. What other opposites can you see? What can you see?
Well, Mary is dressed, Jesus is undressed.
Jesus is undressed, so you have dressed and naked. What else do you have? You have man and woman.
You have dead
You have dead and alive. You have a mother and son. 2 years ago, I took a group of Muslim women from Kabul. They were on a special visit to Rome, and I was asked to take them through St. Peter's, and we stopped in front of the statue, and they started to cry. I didn't say a word. We just stood there, and they started to cry. And then I started to cry, because I understood why they were crying. Why were they crying? Because they identified with the statue, because they were dressed like she is, and because many of them had held their dead son in their arms, just as the statue. And you think of the power of communication. Here is Michelangelo, who lived 500 years ago, and a piece of art that he made 500 years ago is still able to communicate the same emotion through a piece of stone. That is power in communication. What nobody knows, because it's not in the art books, is that the key to the statue, there's always a key in every piece of art. And the key to the statue is in her hand, her left hand. What is she doing with that left hand? What is she saying? What is she saying with that gesture? In non-verbal, this is we talked about yesterday, this is non-verbal communication.
Is this acceptance?
Oh, very good, very good. That's what I mean when I say looking and seeing. Huh? Seeing and looking, yes. She's saying, this is the worst thing that could happen to anyone. The worst thing that could happen to anyone is to hold your dead child in your arms. And yet, she says, I accept this. I know that this must happen, and I accept it. Incredible, 23 years old. To understand that first, and then to be able to express that. To understand it, and to express it. What a challenge, huh? What a challenge to all of us. The church understood and understands the power of the media, and so it's not enough that it uses choirs and architecture and art and music. It must enter the new technological era. And so it has its own newspaper. And it has this terrible title. Can you say it? Really? Oh, you can say it. It's terrible. If ever you start a newspaper, do not call it L'Osservatore Romano. It takes you longer to say it than to read the newspaper. And that's when it started, in 1861. It's one of the oldest newspapers in the world. In the world, did you imagine, huh? The Pope starts his own newspaper before anybody else. Number one, the first newspaper in the world. But that's not enough. We go ahead in technology, and Italy becomes one country. There's a man called Garibaldi. The Pope is this one. His name is Pius IX. What do you notice? It's 1861. What do you notice about him? What's he doing? This was on the front page of the first edition of the Vatican newspaper. What's he doing? Where's he looking? To the past? No. Where's he looking?
The future.
Yes! Here's this little old Pope in the Vatican, and he's saying, Forward, into the future, follow me. Technology leads.
But he still holds the tradition.
Oh. You're very wise. You really are. Very few people see that. Can you see what Arthur sees? Can you see what Arthur sees? That is very clever. Here's the Pope dressed in white, and he's pointing towards the future. He's looking forward, which is, you said, very, but his left hand is on a cushion. What's on the cushion? The crown, the papal crown. He says, yes, we look to the future, but don't forget, I'm in charge. Because that's what the crown represents. I'm the boss. If you want to get to heaven, you have to come through me. That's what he's saying. And that's what the Osservatore was trying to say. Even though Italy is united and the Pope was no longer the king of Rome, don't forget I'm still in charge. And he uses print, which is what he had, to do that. But technology moves on. Oh, that's where I work. And this is when we started working. Well, not me, I wasn't born yet. I know you may think I was born then, but I wasn't. 1931 was when radio was born. And yes, the Pope was this one. He was Pius the 11th. We like the name Pius. Pius 9, Pius 11. There he is. Who's the man standing next to him? Marconi, the man who invented the radio. When you come to my office, I will show you this microphone. We have this microphone. The microphone the Pope used to make his first message to the world. What language do you think he spoke in?
Latin.
Yeah, very good. He spoke in Latin. Do you know what his first words were? Very interesting. No coincidences. He did not say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. He did not say, people of the world. He said in Latin, ad omne creatura, which means to all creation. He spoke to all creation. Why? He was talking to the aliens. It's true. They didn't know where the radio waves went. It's true. They knew that you could talk into a microphone here, and people over here could hear you. But they didn't know what happened in between. And so, not to offend anyone and to be politically correct, even then, he begins his speech by saying, whoever you are, wherever you are, this is me, the Pope, talking to you. In 1931. I think that was quite adventurous. But technology moves on, and here we are in Vatican City. That's what it looks like on the map. That's what it looks like in reality. How big is Vatican City?
Very small.
It's very small. You take all the countries of the world, all the countries of the world, and you put them flat on a soccer field. You play soccer in Ukraine, right? Football? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. You put all the countries of the world flat on a football field. Vatican City is 1/2 of a postage stamp on that football field. That is how small Vatican City is. There it is, and there's the Vatican Radio Tower inside Vatican City, which broadcasts to the whole world in 45 different languages. Okay, go. How many languages can you name? Go. Languages. Go. Name them. Ukrainian, Spanish,
French.
3, 4,
German.
5,
French.
6, 7. We said French. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Danish.
We said Danish.
Polish.
What was that other language you said? No. What language? Doesn't count. 13. Huh? 7, 8, 18,
Latvian, Lithuanian,
19,
Estonian,
20,
Finnish,
21. Urdu. We said that. Urdu. Where do they speak Urdu?
Hungarian,
Aha! Where do they speak Urdu? Pakistan. Pakistan. Yes, we speak Urdu as well. Then, how many languages did we get? About 20. We speak 45. It's a lovely game. Try and name, after dinner tonight, have a game and see how many languages can you name. We speak 45 different languages. Why do you think the Vatican radio speaks 45? Why would we bother? Why not just speak 5 or 6? Why is it important to speak so many languages?
Because all people must understand that you can say them.
God speaks to us in our own language, doesn't he? Sometimes he uses a translator. But most of the time, that's true, he does. God does use translators sometimes to speak to us. But most of the time, he speaks to us in our own language. And so we believe it's important. And it costs a lot of money. You can imagine it's very difficult to maintain 45 different languages, including Ukrainian. We have a Ukrainian program as well. Technology moves on. We jump to 1983. Took a long time to get to the Vatican television. Why did it take them so long to get into television? Why do you think? Because it's expensive. It costs a lot of money to make television programs. It's a very expensive medium, and it took them a long time to get into television. Still today, the Vatican television doesn't broadcast. It just records everything the Pope does. And who is the Pope? For 100 points. Who was the Pope? It was John Paul. Is it a coincidence that John Paul II started the Vatican television? Do you think it's a coincidence? Yeah. Who thinks it's a coincidence? Nobody. Good. Why would John Paul II be the one to start to think, hey, it's important we have a TV? What did he do? He traveled. What do you do when you travel? What do you send home? Pictures. Of course, you send home postcards. You want people to see what you see. He was the traveling Pope. And so it became very important to show people where he was and what he was seeing. And so the visual became a very important element, and it was his idea to start the Vatican television. Ah, here we are. This is what the Vatican website looks like. Do you like it?
No.
Hands up those who like it. Yes? Hands up those who don't like it. No? Hands up those who are afraid to say no because they don't want to offend me. I'm not offended because I hate it. I think it's awful, but that's just my opinion. Why don't you like it?
It's very old-fashioned.
You can see what they're trying to do, right? They've got the circle there, and we understand now the circle is God, that's nice. And we have the Pope who's in the circle, that's nice. And we have the Holy Spirit next to the Pope, so the Holy Spirit is telling the Pope what to say, that's nice. We've got that. But the rest of it, maybe I should switch it. Can't. No, I'm only teasing, it's okay. But for the rest, yeah, it's not. So, when you come to Rome, you can help us to design a new Vatican website. Okay. That's the address if you want to go and see the real thing. Huh? Vatican.va. But of course we moved on as well. We have our own YouTube channel. Hooray! We have our own Twitter from 2010. Hooray! And our 7 editions of the Osservatore Romano. Isn't this a great picture? That's Benedict in his study, reading the Osservatore Romano. He doesn't listen to the radio, he doesn't watch television, he doesn't use internet. He reads the Osservatore Romano. So now you see what the Pope's study looks like. That's him in his study, reading the Vatican newspaper. A little while ago, the story gets interesting now. As media people, as media professionals, imagine for a moment that you are invited by the Vatican to be the new director of the Osservatore Romano. Well, first, wouldn't it be nice if a woman was named director of the Osservatore Romano? Huh? What would be your first problem? Think, as a journalist, as a media professional, what would be your first problem as the new director of the Osservatore Romano? No, I don't think you have a problem about what to write. The content, You have a lot to write about. Come on, it's not rocket science. Think. Be professional. You're young professionals. These are questions that you need to ask as young professionals. It's a real world you're going out. One day, you won't have professors to tell you what to do. It won't be about writing papers or essays. You'll be in a real world, sitting in a real room, and someone will say, we have a problem. We must find a way to... And so how do you finance it? We have to sell. We have to sell more Osservatore Romano. We have to increase our distribution. Who reads Osservatore Romano? Cardinals and cardinals' mothers and cardinals' cleaning ladies, because they leave them there and then the cleaning lady takes them and then she uses them to wipe the floor and clean the windows, and maybe while she's cleaning the window, oh, she sees something. So that's it. Nobody reads Osservatore Romano. Why would you read Osservatore Romano? So, your job, new director, how do we increase distribution? So, what would you do? Come on. This is your time. Nice job, huh? Beautiful office. Lovely office in the Vatican. Huh? You have a great, beautiful view over the whole of Rome, the Vatican gardens. The food is great. It's a wonderful job. You want this job. You want this job. But you have to decide how you're going to increase distribution. What are you going to do?
Maybe more photographs, infographics.
Most of them should understand what people know, other people.
For young people,
More
some
stories.
Young people, more stories with an
life stories.
Life stories is good. Life stories is good. Keep good.
To sell in the church.
Hmm?
To sell in the churches.
To sell, they do. They already. But they can't even give them away in the churches.
Do you have a digital version?
There is a digital version, but no one looks at it. They have a Facebook page, but they have 3 likes on it. What would you do to increase the sales of the Vatican newspaper? It's a real challenge. It's a serious challenge. Hmm? This is the Catholic Church. You have to be it's a good idea, but you have to be very, very careful with advertisements that you associate with the Catholic Church. Huh? What happens if you take an advertiser and then you discover that advertiser is selling weapons to? No, really. You have to. It's a very big scandal.
But in Poland, Catholic newspaper is the most popular newspaper.
Why?
It's not because Poland is Catholic the most.
So in terms of I'll show you. Want to know what they did? Do you want to know what they did?
Yes.
Are you curious?
Yes.
Do you care?
Yes.
Very good. Then look at the picture and tell me what you see. I actually helped you. I put those big gloves there. What do you see? They wrote an article on 4 young Englishmen who made pop music in the 1960s. You know who they are?
Yes.
Who are they? I know you know who they are. So my son Julian, who's 24, my son Julian comes to me, I'm in the kitchen the other day, and he says, "Dad, look what I found!" And he's holding my LP record. It's the blue album of the Beatles. And I said, "Where did you get that?" He said, "I was looking for a pair of shoes in your cupboard, and I found..." I said, "You put that back." He says, "But no, do you know what this is worth on eBay?" I said, "Yes, I do. Give it back." I got it back. Yes, I know. Beatles, big revival on the Beatles. So, Facebook style. You have to show me Facebook style. Osservatore Romano wrote a series of articles on the Beatles. My question, did they like the Beatles or dislike the Beatles? Are you ready? You have to vote. Show me by thumbs. 3, 2, 1. Vote. Everybody must vote. Come on. Either like or dislike. You can't have... that? No, you can't be. I'm sorry. Facebook does not have this. Wait, actually, like this. Okay. Who says that? Like. No. Not like. Why not?
Why Catholic?
No. Why do you think they didn't like the Beatles?
Because it was something new, but Catholic Church is was the organization that can't.
Okay. Think about why did you say they like or not like?
Don't like.
Don't like. Why do you think the Vatican newspaper doesn't like Beatles?
Because it's more popular than pop.
Because it's good. Do you want to know the answer? They liked the Beatles. They liked the Beatles. They said the Beatles were a very positive influence on many generations, and the lyrics of their songs were very nice because they speak about love, they speak about peace. And somebody said, yes, but excuse me, didn't John Lennon say in an interview once that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus? He did. John Lennon in an interview once said, the Beatles are more popular than Jesus. And the Osservatore Romano said, yes, of course we know that, but he was probably high on LSD at the time, so he didn't know what he was saying. But really, the Beatles were a good influence. And guess what? How many copies of the Osservatore Romano did they sell? A lot of copies. And they said, this is interesting. Let's do some more. So they looked around, and they came up with this figure here, and his name is... Oh, you're so clever. You are so clever. Who knows this is Oscar Wilde? Seriously. Jesus. The education level in this country is astounding. It's a school. Is that one? You have no idea how many students I show this picture to. Can I tell you a secret? Most students I show this picture to, and I say, who's this? And they go. A few months ago, I was at a university in, you know where. And I didn't even ask. I didn't even ask. So I put up the picture, and I was about to say, and this is Oscar Wilde, when a boy in the class says, he shouts out, he says, that's Oscar Wilde! And my heart starts beating. I'm so excited. I go, this is wonderful. You know Oscar Wilde? He says, yes, of course. And I say, so what books have you read of Oscar Wilde? And he goes, books? I said, yeah, books. What books have you read? And he goes, are you kidding? That's the name of the pub I work in on a Friday night, and we have that picture over the front door. The Oscar Wilde pub. But for those of you who don't know, his most famous work is Dorian Gray. So the question is, like or not, did Osservatore Romano like Oscar Wilde or dislike Oscar Wilde? For those of you who don't know who Oscar Wilde was, he was a notorious homosexual. And he was put in jail for 2 years in London because of a very famous trial where he was accused of what they called, terrible word, sodomy. He was accused and found guilty of sodomy. And the richest, most influential, most famous playwright in the world at the time was sent to jail for 2 years. Did the Osservatore Romano like or not like Oscar Wilde? You must vote. You must vote. Do not be afraid to vote. You must take a position. If you want to be a journalist, you must be courageous. Why do you think they liked him?
Those churches try to be more liberal now. So that's why we can say that Pope is more liberal to homosexuals. So that's why they try to show it.
It's very good.
That's very good. Very good. You would have to know that the very last thing that Oscar Wilde wrote, he was still in prison. And in prison he wrote, it was like a confession, and it's called De Profundis. De Profundis is Latin, out of the depths. It's the beginning of the psalm, De Profundis ego clamavi Domino. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. And in this letter, he basically says that he was a bad boy. And he is sorry for being a bad boy. Now, if there's one thing that the church likes, it's someone who confesses. And so, yes, they liked Oscar Wilde. And people said, hey, now the party is getting really interesting. So how many Oscar Romanos did they sell? A lot of Oscar Romanos. So they said, hey, this is really working, so let's keep going. And so what they did was, they published a whole series of articles on this young man, which of course I'm sure you don't know. He's a young man, he wears glasses, and his name is, Harry begins with Harry Potter, that's right. Yes, Harry Potter. Oh, you know him then? No, okay, so they published series on Harry Potter. So quickly, did they like or not like Harry Potter? Go. Yes, like Harry Potter or not like Harry Potter? Let me see my show of hands. Everybody must vote. Vote. Like. Everybody must vote. Yes, vote. Yes, vote. What do you mean no? What do you mean? How can you possibly not like Harry Potter? What's wrong with you? Why do you say no?
Merely when I was in school, all my friends read this book and it's my little protest.
There was a protest in your school over the books. Why?
Merely, I think that we have numerous and other interesting, fantastic books, and this is an example of pop culture.
And so what is wrong with pop culture? Excuse me. Huh? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the Osage Romano did not like Harry Potter. What? Why did they not like Harry Potter? Let me show you. This is the edition. Read what it says. Magic is no longer a children's adventure. They said that it was filled with black magic and that it was a bad influence on children. And they went so far that since the book was coming out at Christmas, because that's what publishers do, a cardinal, it's okay, I won't say the name, a cardinal went to the press during a press briefing, and he said, mothers and fathers, do not buy Harry Potter for your children this Christmas, because it is a bad book, and he is a bad influence on children. What do you think happened?
People started to buy more.
J.K. Rowling wrote the cardinal a personal letter in which she said, Dear Cardinal, thank you so much for telling people not to buy my book. Because thanks to you, instead of selling only 2 million copies, I sold 4 million copies. Yeah. The best way to get people to do something is to tell them, don't do it. It works always. It works always. Okay, so still not enough. So now they were really into this. So what they did was they got this cartoon character who's very famous in the United States, you see, and his name is, oh, it's written there, yes. And they said in these articles, there you see, there's the observatory. You see, I'm not lying to you. You see, there it is. The observatory. They said, in the article they said, it's clear from our reading of The Simpsons, we have been watching The Simpsons for a long, long time, and it's quite clear to us that The Simpsons are Catholic. And Mr. Grunig wrote a letter to the Osservatore Romano, but it was only one line. Are you crazy? Question mark. Are you crazy? Anyway, so they were a little bit upset about that because now you see their whole marketing technique, it's beginning to collapse around them. They went too far. And so they tried to pick up speed, and they tried the one last shot, and this was the last one. Now, you may know who this man is. He is called James Bond. Question, did they like or not like James Bond? Like or not like? Go, 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 go. Ah, confusing now, aren't you? Oh, now you're not so sure of yourselves, huh? Oh, first it was yes, no, now they're going, huh? So, did they like James Bond or not like James Bond?
No.
Think, think, think. Think what I told you. So J.K. Rowling smacked them down, and Grunig smacked them down. Of course they had to like him. Of course they did. And the last film, called Skyfall, who saw Skyfall? You don't do much in this country, really, seriously. You don't go to the sea, you don't go to the movies, you don't sky jump. I mean, what do you do in Australia? Anyway, if you see Skyfall, the last scene is in James Bond's house. And it's in Scotland. I won't tell you what happens, it's not a spoiler. But they said that it was clear from the house that James Bond was also Catholic. And then the kids said, no, but that's enough now, really. Okay, forget it. Start cleaning the windows with the Seventh Romano again. We've had enough. What are we holding? What's the survey? Oh, they have to say if they like him. Oh, how embarrassing. Oh, please like me. I feel so insecure now. Oh, you want to do that? Okay. Tell me when you finish the survey. Finish the survey. I don't want to influence you. Just put, like or not like. Okay. Do you want to go on? Do you care? Are you interested?
Yes.
All right, so very quickly, let's go on. Vatican Radio, let's see what happened here. While the Senator Romano is trying to sell its, oh, look who's there. While the Senator Romano is trying to sell its newspapers, Vatican Radio is trying to sell airspace by putting on the air really handsome, intelligent, talented producers and presenters who, are really good and never mind. Yeah. It's called irony, sarcasm, never mind. Okay. Vatican Radio, and yes, who's heard of Guglielmo Marconi? Marconi? The inventor of radio? Yeah, he really did. He was Italian. And there he is working on his machinery. And that's something interesting if you have nothing to do tonight. Google Marconi and see what you find. He was very famous. There he is on Time magazine. He won the Nobel Prize for Physics, Guglielmo Marconi. And he was so famous because of something that happened in 1912. There was a big disaster that happened in 1912 that made him very famous. Do you know what it was? Oh, well done. Who saw the movie Titanic? Oh, thank goodness. I was getting ready. Okay. Who saw the Titanic more than once? Oh, now I do love you. Yes. Yeah. Full HD, 3D, extended version? Okay, never mind. All right. Titanic, yeah. The Titanic went down in 1912. And if you watch the movie again, you'll see that as the Titanic is going down, did you see the Titanic, sisters? Good for you. As the Titanic is going down and the water is rushing in, there's a man tapping the SOS. That machine was a Marconi machine. And if there were any survivors at all of the Titanic, it was thanks to Marconi's invention. If you remember the story, the Titanic goes down, they send an SOS, and there were 2 ships in the vicinity that hear it and come and are able to pick up the survivors. Without that, everybody would have frozen to death in the freezing cold water. He was so famous, he was in New York in 1912 when the ship went down. And when the Carpathia, which is the name of the ship that picked up the survivors, came to New York, everybody in the city had heard of this terrible disaster. And everybody came to the harbor to meet the survivors. And Marconi came there as well. And when people recognized him, they understood it was his invention that saved them. They picked him up on their shoulders and they carried him all through the streets of New York. And you know who told me that story? His daughter. His daughter. There he is, and there's his little daughter. And his daughter's name was Electra. And Electra, who is in her 80s today, she's Princess Electra Marconi. And she still today doesn't know if her father called her Electra because of electrical waves, or because it was the name of his yacht, the Electra. But that's what she looks like today. Yes, it's okay, we're just friends. So, move on very, very quickly. There's the Vatican TV Center. That's what they go with the Pope. Why would the Church need a TV center still? When John Paul II was very sick, he had a lot of things wrong with him. He had Parkinson's, he was shaking, he had a bit of Alzheimer's, he was dribbling at the mouth, his face was moving. For a big TV company, they would probably come with the camera into a nice big close-up. But if he was my father or my grandfather, I would not like people to come in to a close-up. And this is where having your own TV center was very useful. If you look at pictures of John Paul in the last years of his life, you will see they're all in a long shot, at a respectful distance. This is one of the advantages of having your own TV. Also, having something like Vatican TV, do you remember this? What happened on the 13th of May 1981? That's right. Do you remember that picture? There's John Paul meeting with the assassin. And this was something that nobody thought could possibly happen. Who would try to shoot the Pope? Do you remember that story? Do you remember what happened? Do you remember what happened? Do you want to know what happened? Do you care about what happened? Do you want to hear an eyewitness account? When I'm dead, there'll be nobody to tell you what really happened. You see, I was there because we did a radio commentary on that day. It was an afternoon, and it was in St. Peter's Square. It was May in Rome. The weather is beautiful. And it was a feast day, the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, the 13th of May. And there's the Pope in his open car, because in 1981, you didn't worry about terrorists. There was no such thing. And the Pope is in his backyard, St. Peter's Square. And he's driving around, and this is the picture just before, the moment before. He's just kissed a baby, just like Francis does. And they held up the baby, he kissed the baby, and he's handing the baby back to the person in the crowd. He hands the baby back, and he turns around, and his hands are like this. When the first bullet came out of the crowd, bang! And we thought it was a car. We really thought that a car had backfired, because it was impossible to imagine that someone would shoot the Pope in St. Peter's Square. Bang! The first bullet. And then we look, and the Pope, it hit his finger. His hands were up like this. The first bullet came because, as you know, when you do terrorist training, they tell you, you have a moving target. Where do you aim? You aim for the head. You always aim for the head. So the first bullet was aimed for the head and should have hit his head first time. The Pope believed until the day he died, he said explicitly that Mary changed the course of the bullet. Because the bullet that was meant for his head hit his finger. It shattered his finger, broke his finger, there was blood all over the place, and went off into the air. He was so convinced that Mary turned the bullet from his head that when he survived the attack, he took the bullet to the shrine of Mary in Fatima, where you can see it today. The bullet that was inside him is in the crown of the statue of Mary in Fatima. That was the second bullet, the bullet that went inside him. It's moving very fast. He's in the car, slow motion. He waves like this, bang! And he goes, what? Bang! Second one, the bullet goes straight in. And he starts to fall back. And you start to see the red all over his white gown. And he falls back into the arms of his secretary. Bang! Third bullet. But now the car is still moving. The Pope is moving. The third bullet hits the side of the car. Goes off into the crowd and into the arm of an American tourist who was standing there. Lodges in her arm. Bang! There were 4 bullets. The 4th bullet goes wild, because by now already the people are screaming and they're jumping on top of the assassin, and the car is accelerating, and it's going into St. Peter's, where they put him in the ambulance and rushed him out to the hospital. 6 hours of operation to remove that bullet, and he spent the rest of his life, from 1981 until 2005, when he died, with half a stomach. John Paul. Can you imagine the suffering that he went through? All those years of traveling, he lived with half an intestine. Incredible discomfort, incredible pain for the rest of his life from then on. And still, he was able to go and to forgive the person who did it. Very quickly, here we are. This is the Vatican Internet. This is the Vatican. There's dear John Paul using a laptop for the first and only time in his life. And they literally said, press here. And there he is. But he was very intrigued by it all. He did enjoy technology. There's a famous time we did a TV link-up with different places with young people around the world. And he sat there and he turned to my boss. He always remembers the story, Lombardi. And the Pope turned and said to him, what a wonderful thing television is. What a wonderful thing television is. Because it allows us to be connected. So he was a great fan of the technology. There's dear Benedict XVI sending his first tweet on what we tried not to let people see as an iPad, but of course it is an iPad, as you can see. These are the popes of the media age. There is Pius the XI of the Vatican Radio. There is Pius the XII, the Pope of the Second World War. Who's this? John the 23rd. He is the Pope who calls the Second Vatican Council. Good Pope John. Who's that? It's written there. Paul VI. I started working in the Vatican under Pope Paul VI. When I started working in the Vatican, Paul VI was still carried around on a throne, like that one. When I began working in the Vatican, you couldn't touch the Pope, because he wore gloves. The Pope was untouchable. The Pope was carried like an emperor around on a throne. Not a long, long time ago. Not such a long time ago. When I started working in the Vatican, Paul VI was the first Pope to fly in an airplane. And he went to New York. He went to the United Nations and gave a very famous speech against war. He also was the last Pope to wear that. The papal crown. And there are lots of stories about this papal crown. Paul VI died in 1978, and the new Pope was called? John Paul I. What do you know about John Paul I? How long did he live?
He was Pope for a short time.
He was Pope for 33 days. What does that number remind you of?
The age of God.
33. He was Pope for 33 days, but in those 33 days, he opened the door for the man who was to come after him. Have you ever asked why John Paul II called himself John Paul II? Because mathematically, you can only have the number 2 if first you have the number 1. It was John Paul I who said, "No more crowns." It was John Paul I who said, "No more thrones." It was John Paul I who said, not "dear sons and daughters." Paul VI still said, "Dear sons and..." What is my relationship with you if I call you sons and daughters? What relationship do we have? Hierarchy. Huh? He said, "Dear brothers and sisters." What relationship do we have now? We are equal. It was a scandal. People did not like it. They said the Pope must wear a crown. The Pope must sit on a throne. The Pope must tell people that they are children and he is the father. A very famous speech of John Paul I is almost impossible to find. It is the last speech he gave at his last general audience. He was Pope for a month, 4 general audiences. Last general audience, he speaks about God, and he calls God our mother. Oh, people were very angry. And he said, God is like our mother because God loves us with an unconditional love. Our father may love us, but our mother will forgive anything. There's nothing a child can do that a mother will not forgive. And God is like that. And people didn't like that. John Paul I, he would begin his speech, the written speech, and then he would say, this reminds me of a story, and he would start to talk. Who does he sound like? Who does the same thing today? Pope Francis. Pope Francis does exactly the same thing today. There he is, John Paul. He is your Pope, huh? More or less. You were small, you were children when he was Pope, so you remember the traveling Pope. How far did John Paul travel? We've calculated.
2 times to the moon.
And back, and back. Twice to the moon and back. You've been listening to my interviews. Twice to the moon and back. That's how far John Paul had traveled all over the world. I was with him in Australia when this photograph was taken. We talked about symbols, thinking about the connections. So the photographers in Australia, they wanted a symbolic photograph of the Pope that said, no, really journalistically, they wanted a picture that said Pope in Australia. So someone said, so how are we going to do this? I know, what is the symbol of Australia? A koala bear. So we have a picture of the Pope with the koala bear that says Pope in Australia. Good. Get a koala bear, please. Koala bear. So they go to the zoo, they get the koala bear, and the person bringing the koala bear says, excuse me, you do know that koala bears are very shy animals. And that when a koala bear is scared, it wets itself. Can we have a picture of the Pope in his white clothing holding a koala bear that's all going down? No, we can't. So what can we do? Problem. What will you do? Come on. You have to solve the problem. What will you do?
Pampers.
Of course, diapers. They put diapers on the koala bear. You can't see, but he's wearing diapers. The koala bear is wearing diapers. The Pope is holding the koala bear. No one knows that. Nobody knows that. It will be in my book one day if ever I write it, but now I'm giving it to you. It's your gift. No one knows that. The koala bear with the diapers in Australia. That's my favorite picture of John Paul. That's my favorite picture. There was a group of clowns in the Vatican, and they were putting on a show for him. And they were stupid. They were stupid clowns. They were doing things that clowns do, with the nose, and throwing pies. at each other. And there he was, the old man, and he was laughing so hard at the clowns throwing pies at one another, and that remains to this day my favorite picture of John Paul. There's, you know who he is?
Yeah.
Yes?
May I ask you a question?
Certainly.
What language did he speak? I mean,
Who?
John Paul II, except Polish, because he was from Poland.
He spoke German very well. Very, very well. He spoke Italian well,
But
French very well, English very badly. He would read. They would give him the scripts with big letters. He could read languages, most Slavic languages he could read very well. But he spoke in Italian and Polish were his favorite languages. Yes, I chose Time magazine because Time magazine highlights the different phases, the different stages of Benedict's pontificate, which was not an easy pontificate. Not an easy pontificate. Look how they get darker and darker. And look how the titles change. Huh? First he's the smiling pope. And they get darker. I think it's a wonderful example of how the media, that already they didn't like him very much. He was too old, he was too intellectual, he was too German. They didn't, and then it just got darker and darker and darker. And the last title is, as you read, the Pope's Nightmare. So yes, he did resign. Yes, he did. And he resigned because he wanted to resign because he felt that he could not carry the burden of the church and do what needed to be done. And it was time for a change. And here's the change. And you know him well because you see him on your TV screens. And that's his famous Buonasera. And the media loves him. He cannot do anything wrong. But we're not so sure that's a good thing. Because the media has love affairs with a lot of people. And what will happen when they decide they don't love him anymore? But right now, there he is, doing what he does. The tactile pope, the pope who touches, the pope who is not afraid to embrace, who loves disabled and handicapped people, the pope who looks you in the eye. That was what I talked to you about yesterday. Got it. Is that useful? Do you know more now than you knew when you came in this afternoon? Will you be able to tell stories after today? Will you be able to tell other people some of the stories you heard in this room today? Will you be able to tell people you heard the stories? Yes? Will you? No. Then I'm happy. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll see you later. And for our translator, thank you. Thank you so much indeed.